You're listening to the Dreaming and Doing podcast with your host, Melissa Wessner, a licensed counselor and entrepreneur. If you're a big dreamer who wants to take inspired action in your personal, professional, or business life, you're in the right spot.
Welcome back to the Dreaming and Doing podcast. I am really excited to be talking with our guest today. We're going to be with Jessica Tappana, who is a licensed clinical social worker with a private practice in Missouri that specializes in treating trauma and anxiety. She is also the founder of Simplified SEO Consulting, which helps private practices get their websites in front of their ideal clients. And one of the things that I find so interesting about Jessica is that she loves traveling. And it's not just the love of traveling, it's just that, it's that she's pursuing some really incredibly inspiring dreams right now. And that's what we're going to be talking about with her today. So welcome, Jessica.
Thank you for having me. I'm so excited to be recording this right before starting out on probably following the biggest dream I have ever followed.
Yes. Well, and I know, one, thank you for recording with us today, because I know you were like, it's going to be a really busy week and I'm going to cram this in. And so I know that you said you're going to have a lot going on. So where are you at today and how are you doing with everything that's going on?
Yeah, today is an exciting day. Today is it's Monday, the last week I have at my office or work, but I'm actually at home. Behind my computer here are 7 bags that are halfway packed. Well, they're mostly packed, that we're going to take on as we leave for my family of 4 to travel for 6 months. So, yeah, excited. And then we found out this morning that our itinerary might change again. It would be the third itinerary change, the second major itinerary change. So I'm a little anxious trying to know that we're about ready to embark on this journey, but we could have another major itinerary change just because of the state of the world. A week before we leave home and only a couple of weeks before we embark on the main portion of our trip. So yeah, doing okay. But it's all an exercise in just being ready for anything and being flexible. And I'm not necessarily naturally the most go with the flow person. So it's definitely a growth edge for me.
I hear that. So I have been seeing these amazing pictures online, pictures of things that you're doing with your family, pictures of things that you've been doing with your team. Talk with us a little bit about what you have been doing with your family and with your team and what you are about to do.
So I've always loved to travel. My parents we live in Missouri, which is the middle of the United States. And my parents always kind of saw that as a home base. And they said, the nice thing about being in Missouri is nowhere is really that far in the United States. And it's a good jumping off point. And they prioritize travel. They said they'd rather live in a really modest house and travel. And are lucky enough to have the ability to do that. And so really forego whatever we need to forego in order to travel. And that was the way that my sisters and I were raised. And we've always followed in that. All 3 of us really have always kind of followed that from the day I got married. It was whatever we have to do to travel. I remember sleeping in my car with my husband in order to road trip it when we were engaged. And so that's been our attitude. But as we've scrimped and saved and worked really, really hard in our respective careers, we've been fortunate enough to be able to do more and more traveling. And then we saved for our dream 10-year wedding anniversary trip that was canceled because of COVID. And we were supposed to go in April 2020. And when it was canceled, I remember in May 2020, our refunds were coming back in and saying, to my son, like how important travel was to us and how much we wished we could have gone. And I shared with my then, how old was he? He was 7-year-old that one of my biggest regrets in life was not studying abroad. I'd spent a month in China my freshman year of college, but I'd never officially studied abroad. He goes, well, Mom, why can't we study abroad? You're working from home. The truth is that's like visa wise would. So ultimately what this turned into is my husband found an incredible deal on a world cruise, and that's what we're embarking on. Is we're going on this world cruise, and we've been planning it now for 3 years. And in addition to that, we've gone on some test cruises, because you can't just put two children on a cruise that had never cruised before. And then we, in the meantime, started taking my team on trips. My simplified SEO consulting team lives in 3 different states. I started looking at bringing them all to Missouri for a team retreat to do some training. And we realized it was actually cheaper to take them on a Caribbean cruise than to bring them all to Missouri and pay for all their food and stuff for a few days. So we've now taken them on 2 different cruises. And that's also great for testing out. I took my kids, and that's been great for some of their test run cruises. And so yeah, people are like, you must really love cruising. I'm like, yeah, I do, but I also just love I love seeing the world. And for us, cruising is a really logical way to do it, because as extravagant as it seems, it's actually often, if you find good deals, very reasonably priced way to do it. There's childcare, and so when I'm trying to work, it's great for sending kids to kids club, and my kids are in heaven doing that. They love going to kids club. For team, it's great because we can have times that we come together and work, but then my team can go off and do their own thing for a while. Same with family. We can have family time, but then the kids can go to kids club, and we can have dates. My husband and I can go to the show or whatever. So yeah, that's what we've been doing, is we've been going on little test cruises. We even did a transatlantic one this year. After I'd gone to a conference overseas, then my sister convinced me. She's like, okay, you've got to test going across the Atlantic Ocean with your kids and make sure that they can survive that. So we did one that crossed the ocean in September, and we survived that. In fact, we got off, and my 6-year-old, she'll turn 7 on the transit or on the world cruise. She has always been my not so excited to travel one. She's the one that's like, do we have to travel?
Oh,
Home. She got off the transatlantic in September, and she goes, do we have to get off the boat? And my husband and I looked at her and high-fived her. We're like, we've turned her into a traveler. We can do this. So she's now excited about the world cruise. When we thought we'd have to cancel it because of kind of everything in the Middle East, she was upset. And so we're like, okay, slowly over the last 3 years, we have somehow turned this child from crying at the thought of having to sleep on a boat to now being excited about it.
Wow.
So.
Well, and I listened to this other podcast that and I remember you telling the story of your son on that podcast as well, and that he, your family and how your parents kind of inspired a love for traveling, but then also that your son was the one who said, hey, well, why don't we do this? And the thing that I was thinking about as I was hearing you on that episode and I was going for my walk, I was thinking about, what an important message that sends your son, right? I think about, obviously not every family is going to be in a position where they are logistically able to, or even wanting to, cruise around the world. But I think how many children might have a really cool idea like that, to be told, that is absolutely bananas. There's no way in the world that is possible. And that's not what you did. You actually heard him out. You entertained his idea. And rather than shooting it down, you were like, let's kind of sit on that a little bit and let's think about it. And I was thinking about what a big message that sends to children who have big dreams, and to have adults say, you know what? Yeah, maybe that is possible.
Well, and even I think one of the hardest things for the first year was figuring out how each member of our family have different dreams and have different priorities, and how to figure that out, right? Because we are all different and we have different personalities. And even take my 2 children, at first this sounded like a horrible idea to my daughter. And my son's big thing was of everywhere, he was like, I have to go to Africa. And my daughter, like I said, she's a homebody. Like she really would be happy just to stay home all day. And so putting her like the idea of like at first my son and I were like, okay, we want to go to once we realized we couldn't just like hang out in London, we looked at the different visa options and it would have been hard. Like we could have figured it out, but like maybe one of the work visas, but that was going to be more of a challenge. So then we're like, okay, we'll go to 4 different countries and spend 2 months each on the 4 different continents. But like my son and I wanted to live like the locals. And so we had this beautiful idea of like, we're going to go integrate ourselves into the like local culture. And knowing my daughter's personality, we just realized this was not going to work for her, right? And so figuring out for each of us what this meant, the cruising idea was truly what was going fits my daughter's personality better, where she can lay down her head each night on the same in the same spot. It just is going to fit her better. And then, but then to me, I was looking at World Cruises, and a lot of the companies, if you look at the cost of it, there was no way that was ever going to fit our budget for 4 of us. And so I totally gave up and said, "There's no way we're going to make this work." To be completely honest, we're talking about dreaming. I'd love to be like, I pursued our dream relentlessly, but I gave up and was just like, "There's no way it's going to happen." It was my husband that like, and he's always been more of an idealist where I'm more of a realist. And so he like snuck around, quite frankly, continuing to look it up until a Black Friday sale that had kids sale free. And he was like bound and determined. And he's like, I found it. And I didn't even want to look. He's like, no, you have to look. Like legit, I found a way that we can make this work. And we'd been sitting on everything that had come back from the dream trip that got canceled that was going to be a bit more extravagant, and everything that we hadn't been spending in COVID, because I thought that the whole I was convinced my businesses were going to totally crash and we'd be on the streets or something. And so he just was like, no, we actually can do this. And then still when I went to both of the leadership teams at my business and I like whispered it to them, I was like, my husband thinks that we can do this thing. I know we can't. I know you're going to think I abandoned you guys. And both of my leadership teams at each business were like, I mean, don't you trust us? Like, we can do this. We can make this work. But yeah, no, just figuring out, I want to support my children in dreaming. I want to support them in figuring out like how to problem solve and how to figure things out and how to respect each other and how to be okay with the fact that sometimes it might even look like our dreams contradict each other. And even in like a partnership, I love seeing your posts about you and your significant other and how you guys have very different traveling styles. I love it because that's how me and my husband are. Our personalities often could not be more different, and just figuring out how you live with that in our family. My husband and I are very different. My kids are very different. And how do we find ways to help promote each other's dreams and support each other when at first glance it might not look super compatible?
Mm-hmm.
And it can be. It just takes thinking outside the box.
Yes. And so many of the things that you just said are things that I wanted to ask you about, right? Because I think, one, you have 2 businesses, you have 2 children. I don't even know what your partner does, but like he's in the mix too. And I think that there are a lot of people who might say, oh my goodness, I would love to travel. Wouldn't it be so amazing to travel the world? And a minute after this exciting statement comes out of their mouth, then they're like, but this, but that, but, I can't do it for all these other reasons. And they shoot down their own dream.
Yeah.
And your situation is, I mean, it's not like it's a unique situation, right? I mean, you're a parent, you have 2 kids, they're school age, you have not one business, 2 businesses, and a partner who might have his own work stuff that he's doing. So it's not like magic pixie dust fell and put everything in place for you. You had to be creative and you had to be someone who's going to say, yes, these are real challenges. Yes, we still want to do this. And what are we going to do to troubleshoot? And so I'm wondering, what is it that you and your family had to do to navigate some of those very real challenges that anyone else in your shoes would have had to navigate?